Sorry, I'm just trying to stay cool during this brutal March heat wave that we now have to deal with for some reason. I decided against going to the store to buy a fan because I figured I could save some money by buying a digital one. Unfortunately, this is what they sent me. Not very good for longevity. Only I could use this as a metaphor for something. Anyway, buy any new games lately?
Can I ask a hypothetical real quick? If you're spending upwards of $70 nowadays on a new thing, and you're not sure if you're gonna like it, wouldn't you rather be able to sell it off and get some of your money back if you end up not enjoying it? It's like, sure, I could buy a digital piece of shit, or I can buy a physical piece of shit and get $4.80 back for my physical piece of shit. You see, that is the economy that I enjoy. Not to mention, I can buy other people's used shit for a heavy discount. For example, a copy of Call of Duty Infinite Warfare on Steam costs $59.99, just like it did when it launched. A used physical copy from GameStop only costs $17, so why would I pay the extra $40? Now, a lot of people tell me that they only buy digital games because it saves them the hassle. It's a lot more convenient to just open up a digital file than it is to pop in a physical game. Yeah, I too hate taking 6 steps to the right. Sure, it's kind of hard to live as a minimalist when you have a shelf full of fire hazards staring you right in the face, but at all times I can look and see what's in my collection. When I have a digital library, I forget what's in it half the time. But a lot of publishers are taking advantage of those who buy digital for convenience sake, and are using it to peddle digital-only games in this day and age, which just doesn't sit well for me. On top of not being able to resell or return a digital file, you can't lend it to a friend or borrow it from a library. But worst of all, when a digital file gets pulled off the digital marketplace, a lot of times that spells the end of the game's lifespan. Case in point, the original release of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World the Game. Being based off of a cult classic movie based off of a graphic novel with licensed music from Anamanaguchi, it's fair to say the licenses were all over the place for the original release for this game. Needless to say that the game got delisted not too long after it was originally published. For almost a solid decade, very few people were able to play this game unless they had the file on their PlayStation or Xbox. That is until Ubisoft announced that they were going to be re-releasing it for the film's 10-year anniversary. And of course, immediately following that was a flood of people asking for a physical copy. This game's pretty great, so understandably a lot of people were worried that they wouldn't be able to play it again in the future. Thankfully, limited run games pulled through and were able to publish more than enough physical copies to satiate everyone's needs, but that doesn't solve the problem for everybody, specifically those who bought a digital-only PlayStation or Xbox this generation. If you don't buy the digital copy of this game right now before it's delisted, you're never going to have the opportunity to play it unless you hack your console. And hell, even if you do buy the digital copy and have it in your library, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to play it in the future, even if you rightfully own it. Ironically enough, another Ubisoft property had this problem. Assassin's Creed 3 had a spin-off on the Vita called Assassin's Creed Liberation. Now, after the Vita shit itself and no copies sold, Ubisoft decided to port it to home consoles and Steam as a digital-only release. And last year, they announced that if you own a digital copy of this game, even though you rightfully paid for it, they could take away access to it at any time. Now, for this case in particular, Ubisoft did reverse this decision, but who's to say that that's going to happen in the future? Truth be told, when you buy a digital copy for a game, that long-ass terms of service that nobody reads does say that the company you're buying it from has the right to take it back from you at any time whenever they want for any reason. Needless to say, with physical games, that can't happen. Even if a company tries to revoke your license for it, just disconnect your console from the Wi-Fi and play it offline. For most games, you don't need a constant internet connection to play a game off a disc. You can play what's on the disc. It might not be a finished product, as a matter of fact, most of the time it isn't nowadays, but it's something, it's there. Unless you bought a copy of Modern Warfare 2. What the fuck, Activision?
And you know, while we're in the topic of ownership, has this ever happened to you? You get up early in the morning, you grab your favorite powdered energy substance, you add some water, and then you realize, oh yeah, I don't own any cups. Well, thankfully, this video's sponsor, Waifu Wares, is here to help with that. Waifu Wares makes some of the highest quality shakers I've ever used, by far some of the highest quality on the market. They're fully compatible with all of your favorite powdered energy substance brands, and unlike the cups that those companies make, Waifu Wares are actually built well. They're also only a fraction of the price that the other shakers cost. If you want to save even more money, click the link in the description or head over to waifuwares.co.uk and use code DanRock at checkout for 15% off your entire order. Say you don't give a shit about preserving your library or preserving games in general. Say you just want to buy what's there conveniently and move on with your life. Well, every time someone does buy a digital game, it does more harm than good to the industry in more ways than one, specifically to local game stores that are dying for your patronage. Now, I don't necessarily just mean GameStop here, they can go f*** themselves. I'm more so referring to the mom and pop stores that
that were able to survive the pandemic, but are starting to shutter due to the lack of sales from people switching from physical to digital. Less mom and pop stores mean less competition, and less competition means more monopolies, which isn't a good thing for anyone. Now, there are situations where buying digital copies of games aren't necessarily a bad thing. For example, with indie developers, a lot of times you don't really have a choice. It's either buy the digital copy of the game, or the game designers starve to death. And hey, sometimes buying the digital copies of those indie games gives the developers the funds they need to self-publish, or gives the developers the notoriety they need to get their game out there, so that way publishers will begin hunting for them so they can work out a publishing deal and get physical copies of their indie games made and put out into the wild. Companies like Limited Run, iam8bit, Super Rare, all of these companies specialize in publishing physical versions of digital games to preserve history and also to give the developers some kickback. And hey, like I said at the beginning of this video, if you do buy a physical copy of a digital game, you could resell it if you don't want it, or you can give it to a friend to play. There are a ton of benefits and possibilities for physical games, so perhaps maybe instead of buying your next game digitally, consider a physical copy for all of the benefits I've already brought up, plus countless others. And you don't just have to take it from me, there's a ton of other content creators and streamers on the internet that believe the exact same thing I do. You should be able to own what you buy. Whether it's to preserve your own library or for preservation in general to prevent lost media, you should be able to own and always be able to play and look at what you buy. If you spend your hard-earned money on it, you should be able to have indefinite access to it whenever you want.
But enough about that. I think I finally figured out a solution for my fan issue. I went ahead and took the digital version and hooked it up to a physical cable. Now this might violate my license, but how are they gonna know? I'm just gonna go ahead and plug this straight into the wall. You've gotta be f***ing kidding me.